Happy lunch hour, gang. All right. As we all know, there's no question that we're kept in the dark by what's actually going on in most everything. And in some cases, I'll agree. We don't know 90% of what actually any country is involved in. I don't care if you're American not knowing what the U.S. government does, or you're Swahili not knowing what the South African government does. Okay, it doesn't make a difference where you are. We're kept in the dark, and the reason they try to do it is because we'd all be basket cases if we knew everything that was going on. However, some stuff is a little bit more important that we know what's going on. Now, we talk about this bombing raid that Trump made the other day, blowing up 3 different nuclear facilities in Iran. And it's interesting to start hearing the stories of, out of the government, we don't know if the enriched uranium was there. Now, this is where it gets interesting. And I'm going to do a little analysis here with the way I see it. Agree with me, disagree with me, whatever you want to think. That's cool, okay? If you got other information, can add on to what I'm saying, go for it, okay? This is the whole point, to get people knowledgeable about things that maybe is not common knowledge, and then people being able to figure this out. So let's start with this enriched uranium. And you take a look at what J.D. Vance said over the weekend, what Stephen Miller has said, okay, and what the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency has said. Okay. I'm thinking these people might be some of the folks in the know. Well, it was not a real big secret that Trump was going to do something. Sometime in the next 2 weeks, this is going to happen, right? We knew that. Okay, so that meant any time from second one up until 14 days later. Trust me, the Iranians were listening to what's going on. The government has now said they don't know where this uranium is. They don't know if it's behind, under the mountain in a bunch of rubble. And it's not like the Iranians are saying, hey, come on in, you can inspect to see that you destroyed everything. Okay? We potentially destroyed, okay, with the bunker busters, the labs, if you will, that they were doing, the centrifuges, stuff like that. But I gotta think that if Iran knew this, with all of Trump's threats to take military action, that they'd remove the enriched uranium. And the speculation now is, by the IAEA and by the U.S. government, that that's exactly what they did, to the tune of about 880 pounds of enriched uranium. Now, there were stories of 4 Chinese cargo jets that flew from China to Tehran. Okay. Could they have sent it to China? Because remember, China and Russia have very friendly agreements with Iran. 90%, just to give you this one, 90% of Iranian oil, because of all these embargoes, goes to China, okay? It goes through proxies. They'll send it to Malaysia, for example, and then the Malaysians will send it to China. That's kind of how they do it. But it's not like Iran can't sell their oil anywhere. China's more than willing to buy it, and they can buy it cheap because Iran can't sell it anywhere else. So when you're the only customer, you can pretty much dictate the price, all right? Then you also get into the point of satellite photos that have shown about a dozen cars show up at the entrance to these facilities. 880 pounds of enriched uranium could fit in the trunk of a dozen cars pretty easily. Okay. Not that I want to necessarily be the one driving the car, but you figure they're not putting them in a grocery bag and that's how they're shipping it, okay? And when you're talking about discs of uranium, okay, gets loaded up there, where do you want to take it? Well, we could take it, put it in these cars, then put it into a Chinese jet and fly it to China. Possible? Very much so. Because China's got the facilities to make nuclear warheads. Russia and China both came out overnight and said they could start giving/selling nuclear warheads to Iran. What's to say China doesn't say, tell you what, if he's going to blow all the stuff out of the mountain with you, just send all that to us. We'll put it all together, and then we can ship it back to you. Right? Okay. You think about the territory that they'd have to go to take it on the ground. Oh, that would be going through Pakistan, Afghanistan, India. Boom, you're in China. Interesting. Not exactly what I'd call a whole lot of friendly states to the U.S., right? Okay. We didn't see anything. Just giving you a thought. Putting it on a plane, hey, no big deal. Fly it on back over to Beijing or wherever and get things taken care of. You ask the IAEA Director General, Rafael Mariano Grossi, okay, about this. Okay. And he said, his quote, Iran has made no secret that they have protected this material. And they asked him specifically if he meant the fuel stockpile and putting it in cars. Asked him if it had been moved. His comment, IAEA Director General here, I do. That they moved it. This is where it gets interesting because, sure, we blew up the facilities, but did we permanently bury the enriched uranium? My guess is no. Okay. You talk about the closure of the Straits of Hormuz. China doesn't want that to happen, right? Because, again, they get all the oil. Xi Jinping is walking on eggshells to see if he can stay in power in China. He's got to do something. You can't really tell the Chinese people all of a sudden, we don't have any oil. Or oil is going to be a whole lot more expensive because we've got to buy it on the free market. It's a communist country, people. They don't have a whole lot of money to be spending on gasoline or whatever. They need cheap oil. They need all that stuff. They get their oil from Russia, sanctions. They get their oil from Iran, embargoes. Not a whole lot of oil drilling going on in China, guys. Okay. Are they in cahoots? My opinion, absolutely. Don't know how much Russia is. Russia's a little occupied right now. But that would also be why China gets 90% of their oil from Iran and maybe the other 10% from Russia. Most Russian men are on the front, okay? Not a whole lot working the pipelines at this point, if you will. These are the things to pay attention to because it's not being mentioned in the CNNs or Foxes or anything like that, that we don't know where it is. J.D. Vance came out on CBS News on Face the Nation over the weekend and said, we don't know if it's there. And nobody picked up that story and ran with it. Nobody decided to dig deeper into it. Nobody decided to put two and two together and go, gee, if they got rid of it, where did they go? Where'd they put it? Because it's not sitting in Ahmed's apartment somewhere in Tehran, okay? You know, you're talking about 60% enriched uranium. Okay. Just giving you this. It's somewhat of a valuable asset. You know, and it's a little dangerous. So before you jump to conclusions and all these people going, rah, 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 we blew it all to hell. We put holes in a mountain. We don't know if it was done underneath. Iran, of course, is saying they didn't destroy anything. The United States is saying we destroyed everything. Okay? Two sides to every story. The truth is usually somewhere in the middle, right? Iran's going to know better if we took out the uranium, made that buried, okay, if you will. We're just going on speculation. Not saying that intelligence isn't going to find out the truth, but trust me when I tell you that the intelligence that is gathered is not shared with the public. Okay? That's why there's a certain thing called clearances. Need to know basis. The American public does not need to know, gee, we just did all this and didn't succeed. They're not going to admit that, ever. Why was this ceasefire so important? Because, maybe they do know that we didn't succeed in what we want, but if everybody thinks we did, great. I mean, the ceasefire lasted all of what, an hour at best? Okay. It's still going on. Both sides, it's now come out, have violated the ceasefire. And there's reporting that neither side agreed to what was placed in front of them, that they had said, we'll agree to a ceasefire if these conditions are met, and if these conditions are met, but neither side ever came together and said, okay, we've got an agreement. Watch what this hand is doing, because something else is going on with this one. All the congressional calls for impeachment and the War Powers Act and all this sort of BS, okay? And I still ask the same question. There's not a single president in my lifetime who has not done something similar somewhere without congressional approval, and yet this is the first time that Congress is throwing a hissy fit. Okay. You know, nobody complained about Barack Obama, or nobody complained about Joe Biden or George Bush or Bill Clinton or Ronald Reagan or anybody. Grenada, Iraq, Afghanistan. Again, we haven't declared a war in this country since World War II, but now they're going to have problems. We don't know what's going on, but this story cannot be allowed to die. You know, the American public pays attention to something for 15 minutes and then they're on to the next shiny object. That's what Congress is hoping for. That's what Washington is hoping for. Oh, we'll go look at something. Notice how we haven't heard squat in a couple of weeks about anything with Ukraine. Ukraine hasn't been in the news at all because we're on to the next shiny object. What's going to be the next one that's going to make us all forget about what's going on in Iran, what's going on with Israel, because our attention gets diverted over to something else while they keep going on this crap. We need to keep paying attention. Where did this uranium go? Unless and until we know for sure, don't rest on your laurels. Pinball out.